In the shadowed depths of a Las Vegas penthouse, sealed tight against the relentless 24-hour neon glow of the strip outside, the billionaire Howard Hughes once stacked dozens of Kleenex boxes like fragile white fortresses around his favorite chair. Each box was a component in a complex ritualistic system. Each tissue was a barrier against a universe of invisible threats that had laid siege to his brilliant mind. He sat there, often unclothed, his once athletic frame withered to skin and bones, for months and then years on end. His world, which had once encompassed the entire globe, had shrunk to the flickering, ghostly light of a movie screen and the whisper of memos dictated in the dark. What invisible chains could possibly bind a man of such boundless wealth, a titan of industry and innovation, to such a squalid and voluntary imprisonment? The homes of Howard Hughes weren't just shelters. They were architectural manifestations of his fracturing psyche. They were meticulously crafted environments where genius teetered into madness, where immense power coexisted with crippling fear, and where ultimately isolation became his only trusted companion. To trace the path of his life through these homes is to witness the slow, tragic construction of a prison built by the very man it was meant to contain. Howard Hughes entered the world in 1905 in Houston, Texas, a child of the new American century. He inherited not just a staggering fortune from his father's revolutionary oil drilling bit, a tool that had changed the face of the global petroleum industry, but also a restless, insatiable drive that propelled him into aviation, filmmaking, and endless, often obsessive, innovation. Yet his personality was a fragile cocktail of conflicting traits shaped in his earliest years. There was a profound fear of germs, a terror of contamination meticulously inherited from his overprotective mother, Aline. There was an iron-willed craving for absolute control amidst a world of chaos. And there was a soaring artistic and engineering vision that demanded nothing short of perfection. These warring forces shaped his homes as direct extensions of his inner turmoil. Early on, in his flush of youth and ambition, he sought grandeur in Los Angeles to fuel his Hollywood dreams, surrounding himself with opulent, impressive spaces that offered a bulwark against the personal losses that haunted him, like the shocking early deaths of both his parents. As his life became a montage of near-fatal plane crashes, public scandals, and brutal business battles, his need for privacy deepened into a pathological obsession. Midlife retreats in the quiet heat of Palm Springs provided a temporary comfort amid failing marriages and deteriorating health. And in his final long years, isolation became his only goal, leading him to commandeer fortress-like hotel suites where he could orchestrate his vast financial empires without ever having to face another human being. These properties trace the arc of his psychological descent with chilling precision, from the ambitious showmanship of a young mogul to the anxious seclusion of a troubled genius, and finally, to the hermetic entombment of a man lost to his own mind. Each home was a canvas for his desperate, lifelong longing for control in a world that, he discovered, was ultimately uncontrollable. Howard Hughes's journey through his iconic homes, his architectural autobiography, began in the late 1920s. A young, impossibly wealthy orphan, he arrived in Hollywood with a singular goal: to conquer it. After a brief period of living in the transient luxury of the Ambassador Hotel, he decided to establish a permanent foothold, a base of operations worthy of his ambitions. In 1928, fresh from his first marriage to the Houston socialite Ella Rice, and with the immense profits of the Hughes Tool Company at his disposal, he acquired a sprawling Spanish colonial revival mansion at 211 South Muirfield Road. The location itself was a strategic choice. The estate was perched beside the 8th green of the prestigious Wilshire Country Club in the heart of Hancock Park, one of Los Angeles's most exclusive and powerful neighborhoods. This appealed directly to Hughes's passion for golf, one of the few sports where his partial deafness wasn't a handicap, and a rare social outlet for his intensely competitive spirit. Built in 1926 by the renowned architect Roland E. Coate for a socialite named Eva K. Fudger, the home was a masterpiece of its style. It drew heavily from California's romantic hacienda heritage, with pristine white stucco walls, rich red clay tile roofs, and a serene interior courtyard that evoked the sun-drenched estates of Old Mexico. Coate was a master at blending the grandeur of Mediterranean revival with modern American functionality, and the house was filled with handcrafted details like graceful arched doorways, ornate tilework, and delicate wrought iron balconies. Hughes immediately began to add his own telling touches. He had the basement reinforced with a massive bank-quality steel vault. Publicly, it was for safeguarding his valuable film scripts, like the one for his epic production, Hell's Angels, and his revolutionary aviation blueprints. Privately, it was an early concrete manifestation of his growing paranoia about theft and industrial espionage in the cutthroat circles of Hollywood and aviation. Step inside this mansion in its heyday, and the foyer unfolded into a sunlit 2-story expanse, with terracotta floors glowing under heavy dark wood beam ceilings that whispered of old-world craftsmanship. The cavernous living room was bathed in the warm afternoon light that filtered through intricate, leaded glass windows. Visitors recalled the air was always alive with the scent of polished wood and fresh-cut flowers. Hughes, in a habit likely inherited from his fastidious mother, insisted on elaborate arrangements being delivered daily. He hosted intimate yet formal gatherings here. The air would grow thick with expensive cigar smoke and the confident laughter of Hollywood royalty, like Cary Grant or James Cagney. But even in these early years, the atmosphere could shift in an instant. Visitors noted Hughes's unnerving habit of abruptly ending conversations, or even leaving the room, if someone near him coughed or sneezed. His deep-seated germophobia was already casting a subtle, icy chill over his social life. The kitchen, with its original, beautifully tiled counters and a cavernous pantry, buzzed with activity during Ella's rare attempts at hosting dinner parties. But Hughes himself rarely lingered. He vastly preferred solitary meals of a medium-rare steak and green peas, which he insisted be meticulously arranged on his plate to avoid any food items touching each other, a classic sign of his burgeoning obsessive-compulsive disorder. Upstairs, the master suite was a grand affair, overlooking the manicured greens of the golf course, but its heavy drapes were often drawn even during the day, sealing him off from prying eyes. Hughes customized the room with a second layer of thick blackout curtains, allowing him to turn it into a private cinema for all-night film screenings. He had a portable projector set up, and the room would hum with the whir of reels as he obsessively dissected his own productions frame by frame, particularly his magnum opus, Hell's Angels, a film whose troubled multi-year production nearly bankrupted him. The bathrooms, clad in cool, pristine marble, became private stages for his increasingly elaborate rituals. He would wash his hands repeatedly dozens of times a day, using a fresh bar of soap for each washing. The sinks, to the confusion of the household staff, were always lined with dozens of half-used slivers of soap. This magnificent home captured the zenith of his early career, a phase of bold, almost reckless risks. It was from this house that he planned and executed his record-setting 1938 around-the-world flight, a feat that made him a global hero. He returned to a hero's welcome, celebrating with champagne toasts in the mansion's courtyard. Yet even then, the cracks in his psyche were beginning to show. His marriage to Ella crumbled under the weight of his obsessions and infidelities, ending in divorce in 1929. Later, Katharine Hepburn, his lover in the late 1930s, moved in for a time. Her vibrant, outspoken energy clashed dramatically with his growing reclusiveness. She later recalled the house, for all its beauty, as a beautiful prison, a place where the man she loved would pace the halls all night, sketching aircraft designs on cocktail napkins, lost in a world she couldn't enter. The mansion's role as a sanctuary took on a darker meaning after his near-fatal 1946 crash of the experimental XF-11 spy plane, which went down in Beverly Hills, demolishing several homes. Hughes, his body shattered and burned, retreated to the Muirfield mansion to recover. It became his cocoon during months of agonizing pain, a period that cemented his lifelong addiction to codeine and other painkillers. The once glamorous home became a dimly lit sick room, the first of the many self-imposed prisons he would build for himself. By the mid-1950s, the pressures on Howard Hughes had intensified to an almost unbearable degree. He was embroiled in titanic legal battles over his control of TWA Airlines. He was facing contentious Senate investigations into his wartime government contracts, famously being asked if he was, in fact, a $40 million question mark. His health was precarious, his hearing was failing, and his obsessions were spiraling. He sought solace, as many before him had, in the dry, cleansing heat of the desert. In 1957, he purchased a sleek mid-century modern retreat in the exclusive Araby Cove enclave of Palm Springs. The home was nestled on a secluded hillside just below John Lautner's iconic Elrod house, a location that promised the one thing he now craved above all else: escape from Los Angeles's relentless scrutiny. Designed by an anonymous architect who was clearly inspired by the era's post and beam pioneers like Richard Neutra and Albert Frey, the house rose on multiple levels, connected by floating staircases. Its whitewashed brick facade blended almost invisibly into the rocky terrain. There were no famous previous owners to add to its lore. Its appeal to Hughes was its anonymity and its isolation. He saw the potential in its commanding 220-degree vistas of the Coachella Valley. He had the existing windows replaced with massive floor-to-ceiling glass walls that flooded the interiors with golden sunlight, effectively turning the entire space into a panoramic observatory for his wandering and often troubled thoughts. Enter through the discreet, almost hidden front door, and the living room opened up like a stage. The post and beam construction created a sense of weightless openness, framing the endless desert views. The air carried a faint, clean tang of sage from the surrounding hills. Hughes, in a departure from the opulence of Muirfield, kept this home sparsely furnished. There were low-slung sofas in neutral tones, a few abstract paintings from his Hollywood collection, but little else. The atmosphere was one of quiet, almost monastic introspection, as soft shadows danced across the polished concrete floors when the sun dipped low behind the mountains. The kitchen was a time capsule of the era, with its original mint green Western holly stove and oven, which his second wife, the actress Jean Peters, occasionally used to prepare simple meals. But even here, Hughes's need for control was absolute. He would dictate menus to her via meticulously typed notes, often with diagrams, sometimes insisting that the peas on his plate be sorted by size. The bedrooms were perched on the upper levels, each with its own ensuite bath and a private balcony overlooking the valley. Their louvered windows were designed to allow the desert breezes to whisper through at night. The poolside bathroom, with its innovative indoor-outdoor showers, became the site of more private rituals. Hughes would bathe obsessively here for hours at a time, the steam rising like a veil, a temporary shield against his pervasive fears of contamination. This desert getaway mirrored his midlife quest for some semblance of balance. It was a phase marred by his deepening addiction to codeine and the constant paranoia of the Senate investigations. He and Jean Peters would escape here for long weekends, but visitors were exceptionally rare. One aide recalled Hughes sitting silently for hours on the balcony, staring at the mountains, murmuring about new futuristic plane designs. Quirky, secretive events unfolded in this secluded space. During one stay, Hughes, who was then secretly funding early CIA projects, hosted a clandestine meeting with engineers, projecting top-secret blueprints onto the vast glass walls under the cover of starlight. The garden, if one could call it that, was a rugged, untamed expanse of native cacti and massive boulders. There were no formal paths, just wild, winding trails where he would wander alone for hours, the profound isolation soothing his frayed nerves. Yet, the home's very design, with its open-plan living and its exposed floating staircases, hinted at a deep psychological vulnerability, much like Hughes's own precarious, fragile hold on his sanity. Howard Hughes's final descent into the abyss of his own mind culminated in Las Vegas. He arrived like a phantom by private train on Thanksgiving night 1966, fleeing California taxes, endless lawsuits, and the personal demons that now gave him no peace. He and his entourage commandeered the entire top 2 floors of the Desert Inn, a classic mid-century resort on the Strip designed by architect Wayne McAllister with a flashy Googie flair, all sweeping curves and futuristic neon accents. Built in 1950 by the notorious mobster Mo Dalitz, the hotel's penthouse was not designed for long-term residency. When the hotel's management, desperate to accommodate the high rollers arriving for New Year's Eve, tried to evict their mysterious high-paying guest in early 1967, Hughes responded with a move of breathtaking audacity and power. Instead of leaving, he simply bought the entire hotel for $13 million. In an instant, the Desert Inn was his. The penthouse was no longer a rental. It was the command center of his new fortress. He immediately began to modify it to his obsessive specifications, sealing the windows with black tape, blacking out the rooms with heavy blankets, and installing a complex system of industrial air purifiers to wage war on the invisible germs he believed were constantly trying to invade his space. The penthouse suite itself, particularly the modest 250-square-foot bedroom, where he spent almost all of his time, felt like a dim, subterranean cave. The curtains were perpetually drawn, the only light coming from the ghostly flicker of a 16mm film projector, playing the same few movies over and over again. The air hung heavy and stale, thick with the scent of uneaten meals and the thousands of Kleenex boxes that Hughes rearranged obsessively, their white forms glowing faintly in the gloom. He lived almost entirely naked here, his emaciated, shockingly thin frame sinking into a worn leather chair. He was surrounded by dozens of glass jars, which he used for urine to avoid what he considered the contaminated environment of a bathroom. The adjoining rooms housed his team of aides, mostly young, clean-cut Mormons, who were forbidden from seeing him or making eye contact. He communicated with them solely through an endless stream of handwritten memos slipped under the door. This sealed, sterile space encapsulated the final tragic breakdown of a great American mind. It was a period of intense narcotics addiction and crippling paranoia. And yet, in one of history's most stunning paradoxes, it was from this dark, squalid room that Hughes orchestrated the second act of his business career. Without stepping outside for 4 full years, he went on a buying spree, acquiring the Sands, the Frontier, the Silver Slipper, and other iconic Vegas casinos and hotels. He bought television stations and vast empty tracts of desert land. He became the largest private employer and the most powerful and feared figure in the state of Nevada. Parties, there were none. Instead, bizarre, rigid rituals dominated the daily routine. Aides would deliver his meals, a small piece of chicken, a few chocolate bars, a glass of milk, on trays that were wrapped in layers of Kleenex. Hughes would then use yet more Kleenex to handle the utensils and the food itself. His entertainment consisted of watching a handful of films on a continuous loop. His favorite was the Cold War thriller Ice Station Zebra, which his aides estimated he watched at least 150 times. Visitor impressions are almost non-existent. Robert Mayhew, his chief of staff in Las Vegas, a man who executed deals worth hundreds of millions of dollars on his behalf, never once met him face to face. He described the atmosphere outside the sealed bedroom as one of eerie silence punctuated by the urgent, rustling whispers of memos being passed back and forth. The end of his Vegas chapter was as strange as its beginning. On Thanksgiving night, 1970, 4 years, to the day after he arrived, his aides, concerned for his life, carried his broken 90-pound body out on a stretcher, smuggling him down a fire escape and away into the night, leaving the bizarre, silent fortress behind. Howard Hughes's designs, his modifications, his very use of these spaces laid bare the profound contradictions of his soul. In the grand Los Angeles mansion, the kitchen stood as a bastion of his obsessive need for control. Meals were not for pleasure. They were exercises in surgical precision, with peas being measured with calipers, a desperate attempt to impose a rigid order on the chaos of life. The beautiful garden, overlooking the Wilshire Country Club, was not a place for social gatherings, but a private retreat where he would practice his golf swing alone for hours, the rhythmic thwack of the ball a kind of meditation against the growing turmoil in his mind. His closet revealed the aviator beneath the mogul, perfectly tailored suits from Savile Row hanging next to oil-stained flight jackets, a wardrobe of unfulfilled dreams and past glories. In Palm Springs, the open verandas and glass walls seemed to invite a vulnerability that he rarely allowed, a rare concession to the calming power of nature. But the home's floating, seemingly unsupported staircases became a powerful symbol of his own precarious mental balance, a genius forever ascending, with madness lurking just below. The Las Vegas penthouse, by stark contrast, was the final logical conclusion of his phobias. It was pure, unadulterated isolation. There was no garden, only sealed views of a neon world he refused to participate in. The kitchen was a makeshift cart of sanitized, pre-approved foods, underscoring his total withdrawal from all normal human activity. The contrasts between the homes sharpened the emotional tones of his life's chapters. The urban LA mansion was his war room and his stage, grand, vibrant with Hollywood energy, its early career hues of rich terracotta and gold mirroring the fire of his ambition. Palm Springs offered a countryside interlude, its softer desert pastels of sand and sage evoking a midlife search for respite, a sanctuary from the scandals and the pain. And Las Vegas marked the despair of his final years, a stark, artificial 24-hour twilight in a windowless void. The penthouse was a tomb of self-imposed exile, a horrifying inversion of the open, sun-drenched expanses of his earlier homes. Where the mansion was a launch pad for his dreams, the penthouse suite was a cage for his nightmares. But here's the twist. Lesser-known whispers and recently unearthed documents reveal even deeper secrets. In the basement of the Muirfield mansion, Hughes's steel vault wasn't just for documents. Archived memos show that as early as the 1930s, he had stocked it with what he called germ-proof emergency kits, sealed hazmat-style suits, rubber gloves, and respirator masks, a chilling harbinger of the madness that would consume him decades later. After his 1946 crash, neighbors claimed to hear phantom engines revving at night, attributing it to the restless, obsessive spirit of the recovering aviator, though his aides dismissed it as the wind. A wow fact from a 1970s documentary interview with his aide, Gordon Margulis. Hughes once locked himself in the Palm Springs master bathroom for 48 hours straight. He emerged exhausted but triumphant, with a series of detailed sketches for a germ-free hospital bed, an airplane cabin, quipping to Jean Peters, "If I can't fly clean, I'll build my own sky." And in Vegas, hidden among the towers of Kleenex boxes, was a secret compartment built into his favorite chair, where he kept his private stash of codeine vials. His right-hand man, Robert Maheu, confided in private letters. He'd whisper orders like a ghost from another world, always saying, "Play everyone off against each other, Bob, so you always have more avenues open." And perhaps the most incredible unearthed gem, during his stay at the Desert Inn, Hughes hosted Fidel Castro's brother, Raul, incognito in 1968 for a bizarre late-night meeting. They debated aviation technology over milkshakes in a room that had been completely sealed off with tape, a detail buried in declassified CIA files for decades. The rare quotes from those who knew him best paint the most intimate picture. His wife Jean Peters once shared with a friend, Howard's homes were his shields, but they were built of such hard material they sharpened the loneliness like a blade. These mansions, these prisons, mattered to Howard Hughes as desperate lifelines in the overwhelming storm of his own mind. His story reveals a terrifying truth, that immense wealth, far from erasing isolation, can amplify it, building taller walls and deeper moats. The legacy of his fame is a hollow echo in these empty, silent rooms. They expose the subtle truths of a singular existence, that genius can thrive in solitude but withers and dies without connection, that deep-seated contradictions can forge a man who conquered the skies, yet was terrified of a simple handshake. Picture the final light dimming in that Las Vegas suite, a single bare bulb flickering out as his aides seal the door one last time, leaving only shadows and the ghost of a whisper where a titan once dreamed of flight. In the end, his properties stand as haunting monuments to a lifelong losing battle for control, magnificent tombs that remind us that even billionaires, perhaps especially billionaires, are forever chasing a sense of safety and belonging in the vast, unforgiving, and often terrifying expanse of their own minds. And that's all for today's video. If you liked this video, hit that thumbs up. Let us know your thoughts in the comments section and subscribe so you won't miss out on future uploads. See you next time.